The content on the Unitales channel is protected by copyright. Unauthorized use may result in legal liability.
The flames engulfed everything around. Fiery tongues licked the walls, greedily gnawing at the wooden beams, tearing chunks from the roof. The house was falling apart before my eyes. Acrid smoke seared my throat, and the heat became suffocating. I was on my knees, peering into the raging inferno, thoughts flashing one after another. Could it be her? Could my wife really do this? Somewhere inside was Emma, my 5-year-old daughter. I strained to see through the veil of smoke and flames, but everything before my eyes was a blur. My breathing grew labored, my thoughts muddled. How had things escalated to this point? Memories were inescapable. It all began many months ago, when life still seemed normal. Only too late did I realize she had been deceiving me all along. And now, Emma might pay the price. Then, I heard her scream. "Daddy!" echoed from deep within the burning structure. I charged forward, guided by her voice. The imminent collapse of the building didn't deter me. I had only one objective: to rescue Emma. As I sprinted, a nagging question haunted me. How could I have been so wrong about the person I trusted with my life? Life had never been simple for me. After 15 years with the CIA, I believed I'd seen it all: murders, heists, betrayals. Yet, I never anticipated encountering betrayal within my own home. By that time, I had been retired for 3 years. Unwritten rules barred former agents from discussing their operations or meddling in ongoing investigations. That didn't concern me. Had left the past behind to focus on my family. My wife, Eleanor, appeared perfect. Tall, slender, with immaculate features and well-kept hair, she always turned heads. We met when she was already a fixture in the fashion industry, and I fell for her poise and self-assurance. Her realm was one of camera flashes, runway shows, and glamorous receptions. I was her complete opposite: reserved, somewhat somber, but as she would say, dependable. After our wedding, all seemed well. We bought a suburban home, and a year later, Emma was born. I would do anything for her. I tried to spend as much time with her as possible, but my job didn't always allow me to be home. Eleanor was often away too. Thus, most of Emma's time was spent with our nanny, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly lady with a kind heart and strict values. Initially, I didn't think much of Eleanor's increasing business trips. She was always occupied: photo shoots, new contracts, events. But as time passed, her absences felt more pronounced. Occasionally, she vanished for days, citing urgent business needs. Our dinners together became rarer, our conversations shorter and tense. Disputes began gradually. On the surface, everything seemed unchanged, but whenever I inquired about her next trip, she would bristle. "Do you actually care about what I do, or are you just trying to control me?" She sharply asked one day. "Eleanor, I just want to understand what's happening." "We're a family," I responded, trying to keep my tone even. "Family?" Her voice quivered with emotion. "You've always prioritized your job over us. And me. I was just a backdrop." That discussion left me sensing a growing chasm between us. She became increasingly distant, and I couldn't figure out why. One evening, I returned home unexpectedly early. Emma was already asleep, the house silent. Eleanor sat in the living room, wine glass in hand, staring out the window. I sat down beside her, hoping for a calm discussion. "Is everything okay?" I asked. She nodded, eyes still fixed on the street. "I don't want to argue. Just tell me what's going on with you," I urged. Eleanor remained silent for a long while, then uttered a sentence that would haunt me for a long time. "Sometimes, I feel like you live in your world, and I live in mine." I didn't realize then that her words concealed more than just weariness or dissatisfaction. I was unaware that ahead lay betrayal, pain, and a struggle for what mattered most. At 42, tall and fit, with short-cropped chestnut hair, I still resembled the agent who had once thwarted major crimes. Eleanor often joked that my serious demeanor appealed to her: a square jaw, sharp features, always a hint of stubble. "You look like you stepped off a crime thriller cover," she would say with a smile back when we could still laugh together. My time in the CIA taught me to see through people, to distrust mere words, and to control my emotions. But I never left my work at the door. The past lived on in my caution, in my habit of assessing every situation, even in my methodical, measured speech. After retiring, I sought a quieter life. Along with 2 colleagues, Mark and Paul, I started a small consultancy. We had served together and decided to continue as private consultants after leaving the agency. Mark was the typical joker: loud, broad-shouldered, casually dressed, and spoken. Paul was the opposite: reserved and thoughtful, more akin to a university lecturer than a former operative. Our work was invigorating. We handled security for major corporations, vetting employees, assessing protection systems, advising on cybersecurity. It was calm, methodical work, a far cry from the days when lives hung in the balance. Yet, even in this new phase of life, I adhered to old routines. Up at 6, a morning run, pull-ups on the bar. Physical fitness was not just routine for me. It was essential. It's like you're still prepping for someone to come after you, Mark once joked. I chuckled then, but inside, I knew he wasn't entirely wrong. Family. It was everything to me. When Emma was born, I vowed not to let my work interfere with our relationship. Eleanor and I aimed to be good parents, though truthfully, Mrs. Thompson was more present in Emma's daily life than we were. She was a strict yet incredibly kind-hearted woman. Emma adored her, and I was grateful for such a steadfast figure in her life. Despite Eleanor's frequent absences and the growing strain in our relationship, I believe things were mostly under control. My life oscillated between home, work, and occasional outings with friends. Sometimes, we'd meet up with Mark and Paul at a bar, reminiscing about the past. How's Eleanor? Still the life of the party? Mark would tease with a smirk. The usual. Busy with work, shoots, contracts, I'd reply, skirting the details. Little did I know that soon, my life would spiral into an utter nightmare. Hey, maybe she's working so hard that she'll retire before you and start traveling? Paul suggested with a hint of irony, and we all chuckled. I joined in the laughter, yet deep down, I sensed it was anything but simple. Something was amiss with Eleanor, but I couldn't pinpoint what. Perhaps, at the time, I didn't truly want to know. I entered the warehouse through the partially open door, moving silently. The floorboards creaked under my weight. The air felt chilly and damp. The dim glow from a lone lamp overhead cast ominous shadows. Suddenly, muffled moans and cries reached my ears. My pulse quickened. I advanced deeper, gripping the gun in my pocket. A mix of fear and anger churned within me. Thoughts of Eleanor being here against her will, possibly coerced, crossed my mind. As I turned the corner and peered into the room, a scene unfolded that I would never erase from memory. Eleanor was hanging by her arms from a metal beam, wrists bound. A gag muffled her face, and her eyes wide with terror and streaming with tears pleaded for rescue. A masked man stood nearby, muttering to himself as he eyed her like prey. I didn't hesitate. Drawing my gun, I stepped forward and commanded loudly, "Freeze. Hands up, or he'll shoot." The man jolted and turned toward me, but instead of surrendering, he stepped towards me. I didn't give him a chance to advance further and fired a warning shot at the ground near his feet. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse, and he instantly raised his hands. "Get down on the ground, now," I ordered. He complied. I approached, snatched the rope he was using to restrain Eleanor's legs, and tossed it aside. Then, I struck him on the back of the head with my pistol and swiftly bound his hands with the belt I had yanked from his waist. "If you move, you'll regret it," I hissed between clenched teeth. Once he was secured, I rushed to Eleanor and began to untie the ropes binding her wrists. Her hands were raw, the skin chafed and bleeding. She gasped for air as the gag fell away, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Harry. Thank you. Thank you," she sobbed, throwing her arms around my neck, her body trembling, breaths uneven. "It's okay. You're safe now. I'm here," I reassured her, holding her close while trying to steady my own shaking. Eleanor tried to speak, but her words were choked. I gave her a moment to collect herself, supporting her by the shoulders as I scanned the room. Something about the entire scenario seemed off. Too off. "Who is he?" I asked, nodding towards the restrained man. I don't know," Eleanor whispered, wiping away her tears. "He forced me to come here. I had no choice." I nodded, though doubts were already swirling in my mind. Calling for backup, I pulled out my phone and dialed Mark. "Mark, I need help immediately. Come to the warehouse in the industrial area and bring Paul." "Harry, are you serious? What's happening?" He sounded alarmed. "Just get here. They'll explain when you arrive." As we waited, Eleanor and I sat away from the prisoner, who lay quietly. Her hands trembled, I still full of fear. I did my best to comfort her, but my tension was palpable. 15 minutes later, Mark and Paul burst into the warehouse. They quickly grasped the situation upon seeing the scene. "Who's this guy?" Mark inquired, pointing at the prisoner. "Not sure yet. He's secured. Take him to your office, lock him in the basement, and keep watch. We need to find out everything before contacting the police." Paul nodded, and without further questions, he and Mark lifted the man and dragged him towards the exit. "What about you?" Mark turned to me. "I'm taking Eleanor home. They'll get in touch tomorrow, and we'll sort this out." Mark nodded and exited with Paul. I helped Eleanor to her feet and escorted her outside. As we settled into the car, exhaustion began to seep in, accompanied by a growing sense of disbelief. Something about this incident didn't add up. Too many inconsistencies nagged at me. If this was an abduction attempt, why did she come here alone? Why didn't she call me or the police? These questions haunted me throughout the night. The next morning, I arrived at Mark and Paul's office. They were waiting for me in the basement, guarding the bound prisoner. The man sat in a chair, his face flushed, clothes slightly disheveled, yet his demeanor was oddly calm, even taunting. "He's been silent all night," Paul reported, rising from his stool. "Your turn now." I nodded and approached. The man met my gaze with defiance, as if holding knowledge I lacked. "Who are you?" I began calmly but firmly. "Why did you meet my wife? What was this charade?" He smirked, slowly tilting his head. "You're looking for the devil in me. But he's not here," he murmured, his voice tinged with derision. "You know what's funny? Your real enemy is right here." "Be specific," I demanded, clenching my fists. "Or it'll go badly for you. Think him the villain, that I orchestrated this spectacle?" He chuckled again. "No, friend, I'm merely an actor in someone else's play. I'm paid to perform. But the scriptwriter of this drama? That's your beloved wife." Those words struck me like a blow. I struggled to believe him. It could have been a fabrication, a desperate attempt to divert blame, but there was an unsettling conviction in his tone. "You're lying," I said through gritted teeth. "Why would she orchestrate all this?" The man shook his head, almost pityingly. "The next step for her is to eliminate your daughter. She's the only obstacle between her and a substantial inheritance," he explained calmly. "Check the prenuptial agreement. See who benefits if anything happens to your daughter." I was paralyzed for a moment, a chilling dread replacing my anger. My daughter, Emma? Could Eleanor truly be capable of such horror? No, it seemed unthinkable. She was the mother of my child. How could she harbor such thoughts? "You're lying," I asserted again, though my conviction wavered. "Believe what you wish," he smirked. "But I'd hurry if I were you. If I'm right, it's already too late." Just then, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, hands trembling, and saw the notification. "Fire alarm activated at your home." Damn. I gasped and bolted for the door. Mark and Paul, sensing the urgency, followed swiftly. My mind raced with dreadful possibilities. Could it be true? Please let Emma be safe. I drove aggressively, weaving through sparse, early morning traffic. Every moment was critical. "Harry, slow down," Mark urged from beside me. It might be a false alarm, but I was too consumed by visions of our home in flames, Emma trapped inside, to heed his words. The conversation about updating our prenup that Eleanor had brought up weeks ago suddenly seemed ominously relevant. I had dismissed it as routine then, but now it took on a sinister significance. As we neared our neighborhood, smoke was visible over the treetops. My heart sank. "Hold on, sweetheart," I murmured to myself. Screeching into the driveway, I was confronted with the horrifying sight. Our house ablaze, flames pouring from the windows of Emma's second-story bedroom. Smoke billowed into the morning sky, and the heat hit us like a wave as we exited the car. "Damn, it's real," Mark exclaimed. Ignoring their calls to wait, I dashed toward the inferno. "Emma," I yelled, plunging into the smoke-filled house. The fire had engulfed the living room, with flames licking the ceiling and smoke thickening the air. I shielded my face and sprinted upstairs. "Daddy!" A weak cry came from above. It was Emma. Bounding up the stairs, I pushed through the intensifying heat. Reaching her room, I found the door slightly open. Inside, Emma was huddled on the floor with her nanny, Mrs. Thompson, who was embracing her protectively against the falling ash. "Emma! Mrs. Thompson!" I called out, rushing to them. "Harry, over here!" Mrs. Thompson looked up, her eyes reflecting fierce determination. I scooped Emma into my arms, pressing her close, and nodded at Mrs. Thompson, signaling it was time to escape. We navigated back downstairs, avoiding the flames. Just as we reached the ground floor, Mark and Paul burst in, faces covered with damp cloths. "This way," Mark directed. We made it out just seconds before the living room ceiling collapsed, sending up a shower of sparks and ash. Outside, I knelt on the lawn, holding Emma tightly as she sobbed. "It's over, baby. You're safe now," I whispered, stroking her hair. Mark and Paul assisted Mrs. Thompson, who was coughing harshly from the smoke. "This was no accident," Mark panted. "Someone orchestrated this." "I know who it is," I replied, heart pounding with a mix of relief and fury. "But first, we need to ensure Emma is all right." Mrs. Thompson crouched next to us, taking Emma's hand gently. "Harry, we need to talk," she said quietly but with gravity. Her words hinted at yet another unfolding layer of the story. We gathered on the lawn, catching our breath against the backdrop of the diminishing crackles of the fire and approaching sirens. I hugged Emma closer, feeling her gradually calm in my arms as the firemen arrived. Mrs. Thompson leaned close, her voice a stark contrast to the chaos. "Harry, I should have spoken sooner, but today made me realize it's gone too far." I turned to her, anxiety tightening my chest. "What is it?" I asked, struggling to maintain composure. She glanced uneasily at the smoldering remains of our home and back at me. "It's Eleanor. I believe she has severe mental issues. I found antipsychotic medication hidden in her closet weeks ago. I wasn't sure, so I hesitated to tell you. This morning, I planned to reveal everything, but there was no time." Her voice shook slightly. "She's been taking these pills secretly." My heart sank as I recalled the harrowing scene from last night. Eleanor, bound and suspended, and the man I had confronted at gunpoint. It had all seemed so surreal, so unlikely. Yet now, amid the smoke and ruins, the grim reality began to set in. Something was terribly wrong. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, as dread began to build within me. "Absolutely," Nanny Thompson affirmed. "I've tried to speak with her, but she's been constantly on edge, irritable. She's had these bizarre, unpredictable emotional outbursts. And when I found those pills, I realized it was serious. Harry, she might have orchestrated all of this. She might even have set the fire." I watched as the firefighters arrived and began their swift, coordinated effort to extinguish the remaining flames. It felt like a nightmare. But what haunted me the most were Mrs. Thompson's words, confirming my worst fears. My wife had lost her sanity. I clenched my fists, struggling to manage the whirlwind of emotions, anger, fear, despair all mingling into a tight knot in my chest. Emma clung to me tighter, and I reassured her softly, "It's going to be okay, sweetheart. I promise." Yet, internally, I knew this was just the beginning of a long ordeal. Sitting in the car with Emma wrapped in a blanket in the back seat, I watched the firefighters douse the final flames. A fierce anger began to brew within me. This was no longer about personal grievances or infidelity. It had escalated into a matter concerning my daughter's safety. Eleanor had crossed a line, and I was resolved to ensure she faced justice. "Mark," I called out as he approached the car, "we need to mobilize all our resources. We're going to find her and bring her to justice." Mark's expression turned serious as he nodded in understanding. "Where do we start?" he inquired. "First, we need to locate her current whereabouts. Then, we need to investigate her associates. I want to know everyone she's met, everyone involved in her delusions. We need to uncover everything, even the smallest details. Anyone who witnessed her instability or participated in her schemes will also be held accountable." Paul, overhearing our conversation, stepped closer and looked at me intently. "Harry, are you sure you want to dig this deep? This might extend beyond a mere family dispute." "I'm certain," I affirmed resolutely. "She's endangered our daughter's life. This is beyond infidelity or simple deceit. She's become a threat to everyone around her." Paul nodded, recognizing the gravity of the situation. Back at the office, I reactivated my old connections. Time was of the essence, and I needed rapid results. Booting up my laptop, I reached out to my former colleagues and requested access to databases that might aid in locating Eleanor. "We need to track her through bank transactions or cell phone signals," I explained to Mark. "She's hiding, but she won't be able to vanish completely." While waiting for the system to process my requests, I planned my next steps. Tracking down Eleanor's associates would be challenging, but I had a starting point. The man from the warehouse might hold the key to unraveling the entire situation. "Paul, contact that man we detained yesterday. I need to interrogate him again. If he knows anything about her plans or her accomplices, he'll tell us," I directed. "Understood," Paul responded succinctly and exited to make arrangements. An hour later, Mark returned with preliminary findings. "Harry, I've got something. Eleanor withdrew a significant amount of money a few days ago. It was transferred to an account linked to a private club known for exclusive gatherings, he reported. My fists clenched as anger surged anew. Each new piece of information suggested that Eleanor was leading a double life, one that I was completely unaware of. We're going in there, I stated decisively. I want to find out what she's been up to and who she's been meeting. Are you sure? Mark questioned. It's a secretive place. You can't just walk in. I've got some old contacts who can get us in, I assured him. Well, find her. And I'll make sure she's held accountable for her actions. Ensuring Emma's safety was paramount. After the day's events, leaving her exposed to any danger was unthinkable. I decided to send her, along with Mrs. Thompson, to a secure location Mark's country house. He had offered it himself, and I was grateful for his support. Are you sure this is safe? Mrs. Thompson asked, her voice tinged with concern as she prepared to depart with Emma. I'm certain, I assured her, meeting her gaze squarely. And thank you. Thank you for being there for Emma when it mattered most. You've risked everything for her. She nodded, her expression solemn. That's my duty, Harry. And I love that girl as if she were my own. When this is all over, I'll ensure you lack for nothing. That's a promise, I declared firmly. She didn't respond verbally but tightened her embrace on Emma. They departed moments later, and I felt a burden lift slightly, allowing me to focus fully on the task at hand, exposing Eleanor and bringing her to justice. My next move was to contact a journalist known for uncovering the murky secrets of the elite. His name was Thomas Randall. He had previously attempted to expose Eleanor's questionable activities in an unpublished article. Rumor had it that she had paid him off to keep silent. Mark, do you have any contacts at City News? I asked upon returning to the office. Thomas might hold the key to unraveling this entire affair, and it was time to leverage that connection. There's a lead on someone who knows where to find Randall, Mark informed me. But be warned, Randall is a tricky character. He won't just spill what he knows without something in return. They'll find a way to make him talk, I responded, my tone icy with resolve. Within a few hours, we pinpointed that Thomas Randall often frequented a bar on the city's edge. Without hesitation, I headed there immediately. Upon entering, the dim lighting and the mingling odors of cheap liquor and cigarette smoke hit me. At a distant table, I spotted Thomas, hunched over a glass of whiskey. Randall, I called out as I approached. He looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes before it morphed into a sly grin. Harry Walker, what brings you here? Trouble at home? He mocked with a sneer. I need to speak with you privately, I requested, struggling to maintain composure. He gestured towards a secluded booth, and we sat down. I wasted no time. You had information on Eleanor. I'm aware she paid you off to keep silent. Digging up dirt on your own wife, huh? Thomas looked amused. I'm not a charity, Harry. She bought my silence. And you'll need to offer something worthwhile if you want anything from me. Money? I inquired. Not just money. I want the full story. If I blow this open now, it'll be scandalous. You provide me with an exclusive all the details and proof, Thomas bargained. Then I'll give you what I know. I assessed him silently. It was a gamble, but I had little choice. Fine, I agreed. But I want the information first. Thomas smirked, leaned back, and produced a notebook from his jacket. Eleanor has been leading a secretive double life. She's been hosting exclusive gatherings for a select group of influential individuals, politicians, business tycoons, even someone from the security services. She's not just indulging in risky games. She's collecting compromising information on her guests. A chill ran down my spine. Why would she do that? I asked. Blackmail, Thomas replied, his expression darkening. But understand, Harry, she's clever. She's always operated through intermediaries to avoid direct links. I need to know these intermediaries, I demanded. I can give you one name, Victor Cross. He's her primary go-between. Find him, and you'll unravel everything, Thomas disclosed. Once you're ready, give me a call. With this new lead, my next target was clear, Victor Cross. He was the linchpin in Eleanor's schemes, yet a man seldom seen in public. Known to frequent a secretive elite club, gaining entry would be my next challenge. I contacted Mark, who had connections everywhere. Shortly, he came through with vital intel. The White Orchid Club, owned by Richard Drake. It's an exclusive venue for high-profile clientele, Mark explained, handing me a forged membership card. I've managed to add you to the guest list. Be careful, though, it's a tough crowd. If you're exposed, it could get dangerous. Thanks, Mark, I acknowledged. You know what to do if things go south. Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Stay in touch, he replied, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. The White Orchid Club was discreetly located behind a grand old mansion facade with imposing windows and heavy doors. I arrived close to midnight, parked nearby, and approached the entrance. The doorman, a stern-looking giant, scrutinized my card before nodding me inside. Inside the club, the atmosphere was charged with an air of exclusivity. Leather sofas dotted the space, candles flickered softly, and the air was rich with the scent of costly spirits and cigars. Soft conversations filled the background, accompanied by distant, subdued music. Surveying the room, I searched for Victor Cross. Described as a stocky man in his 50s with closely cropped hair, he wouldn't be hard to spot. I lingered by the bar, scanning the crowd under the guise of waiting for someone. "Would you like a drink?" the bartender inquired. "Yeah, whiskey on the rocks," I ordered, keeping my gaze fixed on the club's patrons. It took about 20 minutes before I spotted him. Victor Cross was ensconced in a corner, deep in conversation with two men. Seizing the moment when they left, I approached him. "Victor Cross?" I didn't wait for an invitation but sat directly across from him. He eyed me warily, regaining his composure quickly. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows what you're involved in with Eleanor," I stated, making it clear I wasn't just another club member. "And someone who can help you avoid prison if you start talking." Victor looked around nervously, then leaned in closer. "You're playing with fire, kid. If you're here with threats, you're mistaken." "No threats," I assured him. "I'm here for the truth. And believe me, if you don't start talking now, you'll soon be answering to more than just me." He stared at me for a long moment, then exhaled heavily, seemingly resigned. "All right, what do you want to know?" I fired off my questions. "How long has this been going on? Who else is involved? What were her plans?" Victor spilled everything. Eleanor had been using the information gathered at these secretive parties to blackmail her influential guests. She planned to leave me, taking with her a fortune amassed through these machinations. But her ultimate aim involved a major scheme with high stakes, relying on her leverage over key figures to gain control of a significant project. Armed with this information, I knew my next steps had to be decisive. I had captured the entire conversation on a hidden tape recorder. That evidence, combined with the information provided by Thomas Randall, was poised to devastate Eleanor's reputation. "You've said all you need to say," I announced as I stood from the table. "Now stay put and don't even think about warning her." "What are you going to do?" Victor asked, his voice tinged with anxiety. "I'm going to make sure she can't hide from this," I replied firmly, making my way to the exit. The following day, I met with Thomas Randall and handed him all the evidence. He examined the materials intently before nodding in approval. "This is going to cause a massive uproar. Once the article is published, everyone will be watching. She won't be able to silence this with her money or her connections. You'll release it on my cue," I instructed. "Agreed," Thomas said with a sly grin. My next task was to locate Eleanor. I was certain she would have nowhere to flee once the story broke. Her every move would be scrutinized, and no connection would shield her from the consequences. The day after my conversation with Victor, I reached out to one of Eleanor's acquaintances, Michael, whom the FBI had helped me locate. Contrary to my expectations, Michael was a young, perceptive man who seemed deeply disturbed by the unfolding events. We met at a subdued cafe on the outskirts of the city. Michael appeared nervous, frequently glancing around as though he feared being followed. It was clear he knew the gravity of the situation. "Harry, I agreed to meet because I realized things have spiraled out of control," he began once we were seated. "Eleanor, she isn't who you thought she was." "I've started to see that," I responded coolly. "But I need more specifics. Tell me everything about her dealings with Victor." Michael sighed deeply and began his narrative. It began as a mere business association. Victor facilitated her social gatherings, her soirees. But then he introduced her to certain substances. I'm not sure exactly what, but it changed her. She became more aggressive, more impulsive. Sometimes she'd have fits of rage out of nowhere. I tried to intervene, but Victor always had her under his thumb. He made her appear unstable, so when he needed to, he could easily discard her. His words struck me like lightning. Victor was more cunning than I had anticipated. He had used Eleanor as a pawn for his own gains, and now he planned to cast her aside, blaming her erratic behavior on supposed mental instability. "Are you certain of all this?" I pressed, looking him directly in the eyes. "Absolutely," he confirmed. "Victor has the means, the connections. He could disappear quietly, leaving Eleanor to face the fallout. But I think he's planning something more final, eliminating her to tie up loose ends. I wasted no time contacting Mark and Paul. Move on Victor immediately. We have evidence that he's planning to flee, and now we understand he's the puppet master behind all this. I directed. Understood, Harry. We're already monitoring his communications, Mark responded. Good call on setting up that wiretap the night you met him at the club. We can hear everything. Relieved we were one step ahead, I felt a surge of anticipation. Keep me updated, I instructed. The moment he makes a move, we need to act. Shortly afterward, Mark called me with an update. Harry, Victor just reached out to Eleanor. He's urging her to flee with him, claiming things are about to spiral out of control. He's instructed her to bring money, suggesting they escape together. From his tone, it's clear he plans to abandon her once he has the cash. My hands clenched in anger. We can't let him get away with this, I declared. Set up the arrest for when they meet. Eleanor is a key witness, and Victor is the mastermind. Got it, Mark confirmed. We're on it. As the operation was set in motion, I reached out to Thomas Randall once more. Thomas, there's been a development. Victor isn't just a conspirator. He's a major player. We're close to apprehending him, but you need to adjust the narrative. Highlight his attempt to flee and his exploitation of Eleanor. It's crucial the public understands the real villain here. This will make headlines, Thomas assured me. I'll publish as soon as you confirm the arrest. After ending the call, I took a deep breath, readying myself for what was to come. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation. As night fell over the anxious town, preparations were underway for a scandal that would shake the community. Victor and Eleanor were set to meet in a desolate parking lot on the town's edge. Mark and Paul, along with an FBI team, were positioned strategically while I watched from the shadows. Victor's black SUV rolled into the lot right on schedule. Eleanor arrived shortly after, clutching a sports bag presumably filled with money. As they met, Victor's urgent whisper carried across the quiet lot. We need to leave now. This money is our only way out. Eleanor, fraught with tension, hesitated briefly before agreeing. Okay, let's go. But as they turned to leave, law enforcement closed in. The FBI team emerged, weapons drawn, and the arrest unfolded before my eyes. This was the culmination of a meticulously orchestrated trap, and as I watched, I knew that justice was finally within reach. Freeze. Hands up. Mark's voice echoed sharply across the area. Victor spun towards his car, but an agent's stern command halted him. Don't move. Eleanor screamed as she was tackled to the ground, handcuffs clicking into place around her wrists. Victor was subdued and hauled towards a police vehicle. I approached Eleanor as the chaos settled. She lay on the ground, her elegant appearance marred by the dirt and disarray, anger distorting her face. When she saw me, venom filled her gaze. You, she spat, struggling to rise. You've ruined everything. You think you've won? I crouched beside her, meeting her furious eyes. I've exposed you, Eleanor, I stated, my voice calm yet firm. Everything you tried to hide is about to be revealed. Victor planned to abandon you as soon as he had the money. You were merely a pawn in his game. And now? I'll ensure you face justice. Neither your wealth nor your influence will save you. She scoffed, a feeble attempt to regain some semblance of dignity. You've always been a fool, Harry. I never needed you. You were a mere convenience until you became an obstacle. A bitter smile touched my lips, but it bore no joy. Eleanor, I whispered close to her ear, ensuring no one else could hear. You're right. I was a fool. But now, I will see to it that you spend a long time behind bars. And trust me, your scheming won't save you there. Her eyes widened momentarily, but she quickly masked her fear with an indifferent facade, though her hands trembled visibly in the handcuffs. Take her away, I commanded the officers. As Eleanor was led to a police car, Mark joined me. What now? He inquired. Now we wait for the article to drop. Then, she'll get what she deserves, I replied, watching as the car carrying Eleanor disappeared into the distance. I promised to protect our daughter, and I intend to keep that promise. We stood in silence, the weight of the night's events settling around us as the vehicles vanished, leaving us in the stark chill of the night. The following morning, the city was abuzz. Thomas Randall's article had exploded across the media landscape. Headlines screamed, ex-FBI agent's wife caught in web of deception, Eleanor Walker's double life unveiled, shocking revelation, greed and deception tear apart a family. Every news channel dissected the scandal, radio callers expressed their outrage, and social media erupted with calls for justice. The public was clamoring to see Eleanor Walker face the consequences of her actions. As I watched the dawn break, a profound sense of peace settled over me, knowing the truth was out, and my daughter was safe from harm. "Daddy, why is everyone talking about Mom on TV?" Molly's quiet voice came from beside me, her arms encircling my waist. I gently tousled her hair and knelt to meet her eye level. "Sometimes people do bad things, sweetheart. Your mom made some big mistakes, and now she has to answer for them. But don't worry, I'm here with you," I reassured her, pulling her into a tight embrace. The courtroom was packed on the day of Eleanor's trial. Cameras flashed as journalists and concerned citizens packed the seats, with a crowd gathered outside, their chants for justice filling the air. Justice for the victims. Lock her up. As Eleanor was led into the courtroom, she carried a semblance of defiance, her eyes scanning the room, perhaps looking for an escape from her reality. The judge outlined the charges gravely: conspiracy, blackmail, attempted murder. I sat in the front row with Mark and Paul, observing every twitch and sneer from Eleanor. When asked to plead, Eleanor's response was defiant. "No, this is all lies. I'm too young for prison. You can't do this to me." The courtroom erupted in uproar, the community's anger palpable as they shouted for the maximum sentence. The judge had to call for order as Eleanor's outburst turned to screams of denial. "I won't go to prison. You can't make me." Her protests were cut short as guards restrained her and led her out. The prosecutor stood, requesting the sternest punishment given the evidence. After a brief recess, the judge returned, and the silence was palpable as he delivered the verdict: guilty on all counts. The sentence is 25 years without parole. Applause and cheers filled the room, a collective relief palpable among the crowd. Justice had been served. As Eleanor passed by me, handcuffed and defeated, she hissed a venomous promise of retribution. I leaned close and whispered back firmly, "No, Eleanor. It's you who will pay. You will face every consequence of your actions, alone and confined. And I'll ensure you never harm anyone we love again." She paused for a moment, caught in the grip of the guards, then they led her away. Her screams echoed down the corridor as the doors swung shut behind her, and I watched until she was out of sight. My daughter, Molly, was safe now. Eleanor's dangerous games were definitively over. After the trial, life slowly started to regain a semblance of normalcy. Molly had endured her mother's absence with an unsettling calmness. It was hard to tell if it was good or bad, but the truth was Eleanor had rarely given her the attention she deserved. Mrs. Thompson had always been the primary caregiver, and now she was even more a part of our family. Molly quickly adapted back to her usual routines, finding joy in the small moments: walks in the park, bedtime stories, and our days out together. Her laughter was the best remedy for the shadows of our past ordeal. She became the center of my world. Everything I did was for Molly. Her happiness brought light into my days, and each new day with her felt like a fresh start. During one quiet dinner, Mark and Paul shared a look that immediately told me they were holding something back. "Spit it out," I encouraged, setting down my cup. "What's on your mind?" Mark hesitated, placing his fork down. "Harry, you know we're always here for you," he started softly. "But there's something we've been thinking about. It's about a DNA test." My heart sank a little, although I wasn't entirely surprised. "Why?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "We've seen everything you've been through," Paul chimed in. "We don't want any more uncertainties in your life. We know it's tough, but knowing the truth is better than living with doubt." The idea was painful to consider. Molly was my everything. The possibility that she might not be my biological daughter was unthinkable, yet the uncertainty was a shadow over us. It was a matter we had to resolve, sooner rather than later. "Okay," I nodded, my voice steady. "Let's do the test." The wait for the DNA results was agonizing. When the envelope finally arrived, my hands trembled as I opened it. Reading the confirmation that Molly was indeed my biological daughter brought immense relief. I slumped back in my chair, overwhelmed with joy. Every struggle, every sacrifice had all been for her. And she truly was mine. We decided to begin anew, away from the prying eyes of our old town. Our past was too well known there, laden with too many memories. We needed a fresh start. We chose a quiet coastal town, known for its tranquility and friendly community. I took up a position as a security consultant, and Molly started at the local school. Mrs. Thompson continued to live with us, her presence a constant comfort. She had become more than a nanny, she was family. Months later, sitting on the porch of our new home, watching Molly play in the yard, the evening sun casting gentle rays across the garden, I felt a profound peace settle over me. Life had taught me harsh lessons: trust can be betrayed, and worlds can crumble. But with something precious to live for, you can face any challenge. The true meaning of life isn't found in perfection or approval from others, It's found in the love of those you hold dear and in the battles you choose to fight for them. Molly waved at me from the garden, a bright smile on her face. I waved back, my heart full, knowing we were embarking on a new chapter. It was a new day, a new life, and I knew, without a doubt, we were going to be okay.